to another episode of the Sporty Show. I'm your host, William Tyler, and today we're going to get into a little bit of UFC talk, cover those last two fights on the UFC Des Moines card. If you missed them, you missed out on some bangers. That card was kind of a sleeper. There wasn't a lot of huge names on it. A couple of good fights right there in the co-main and the main, but other than that, if you're a casual, you probably didn't recognize too many of those guys, and you may not have tuned in. If you didn't, you missed out. You may want to go back and watch some of those. There were some good ones. Let's break down the co-main. Let's break down the main. Take a little bit closer look at what exactly happened last night in Des Moines. I've seen way too much talk about Bo Nickal getting fraud checked. Okay, that word fraud check, that whole term, I don't think it's the right label for what we saw happen last night, because in order to be fraud checked, that means that Bo Nickal would have had to been fighting somebody. That means, all right, if you can't beat this guy, you're a fraud. And RDR is not that type of guy. RDR is a former 2-division champion. Now, it was over in one championship. I can demote that 2-division simultaneous championship a little bit more, because he won and fought a title. I think it was in October, and then about 6 months later he dropped down. He went up and fought the same guy that he had just fought for the other title. So he did pick up 2 titles. He was a 2-division champ, but he did beat the same guy to get there. You know, that's like going to the jiu-jitsu tournament, coming back, telling everybody you won gold, but you really just beat the same guy or same couple of guys like 3 or 4 times. Nevertheless, one championship is elite. You know, it's not the UFC, but it's right there underneath it, in my opinion. It's definitely high-level guys, and he did really well over there. In addition to what he did in one championship, on the MMA side, he also had some really high-level grappling matches over there. Tyro Tolo and Mika Galvao, he fought both of those guys in grappling matches and won. He lost both of them, but the fact they could get in there and compete at that level does say a lot about his grappling and his jiu-jitsu skills. Now, all of that kind of came into play whenever I was considering, okay, if Bo loses to this guy, or now that Bo has lost to this guy, does that make him a fraud? I don't think so. I think that this is a high-level guy. I think that Bo has been on a rocket ship to get to this point where he was even, able to jump in there with this guy. I was going to say ready, and I guess you could make the argument that he wasn't really ready to jump in there just yet, but let's say that he definitely, earned his way to that spot. He had won enough fights to be ready to enter the ring, at least in the UFC's eyes. Now, hindsight's 2020. We could see exactly how that went. RDR absolutely broke Bo last night. The broadcast incorrectly, I think, called that knee as a liver shot that dropped him, the final one that kind of put him down. I rewatched it. It didn't look like it landed on the liver to me. It looked like Bo was frustrated from the very jump in the second round. He realized that he was outmatched in the striking, and I think at that point he didn't think that he could go to the wrestling, and I don't know if that was because it wasn't working for him. There was a couple of exchanges where it looked like he was able to use the defensive wrestling. In my opinion, he didn't attack with the wrestling hardly at all. He didn't have a lot of offensive wrestling chances or take a lot of offensive wrestling opportunities. I wish he probably would have done more of that. I don't know what the game plan was going in. I know, as I said, there's not a bigger threat in that division whenever it comes to submissions and jiu-jitsu, and the judo and the grappling abilities of RDR are elite, are very high level. So maybe he didn't want to go in there and grapple with him too much. I don't know. But it didn't look like he was willing to wrestle with him. He wasn't able to strike with him. And I think that led to a lot of frustration. And Bo just got broke in there. And listen, that's supposed to be a wrestler's superpower. Whenever you get these high-level wrestling guys, that's what they're supposed to be good at, man. They're supposed to have willpower, unbreakable will. They're supposed to have gas tanks that goes for days. And it looked like those were the two things that broke down really in the first round for Bo. And RDR turned it up a little bit in the second round, and it was obviously too much for Nickel. He kind of crumpled down. He did grab the gut, and, who knows what happened. He could have a serious injury. I don't know. Broken rib even or something like that. But you just think that he would have been able to tough it out if it was something like that a little bit longer. Maybe he was toughing it out. Maybe it happened earlier in the fight. I don't want to be too hard on Bo. I'm a big Bo Nickel fan. I'm a super fan of elite guys from especially wrestling, but any other sport, but especially one of the other combat sports coming over to wrestling, coming over to MMA and giving the UFC a shot. I'm a really big fan of that. And I knew that this was a big challenge coming in, but I thought that we would get a little bit better performance out of him than we saw. So now that we know what we know, what's next for Bo, what's next for RDR? Bo is going to have to not go back to the drawing board completely, but certainly go back to the gym. I think he needs to level up some of his skills. I think that we all know his elite wrestling is real and is present, but it's just not enough to compete at the level that he's now at in the UFC. He's there probably a little early. And so I think he needs to level up his BJJ skills. I think he needs to take a step up again in his striking. I think he's, we've seen him take a step up, but he needs to do that again. Remember when he was knocking guys out back in the Contender Series, I guess it was? Or was that maybe his very first debut? That might have been his very first fight actually in the UFC. He drops that guy and gets the TKO. Can't remember who that guy was now, but that was at least a step in the right direction, but we need to see that next step. And getting, finished by RDR by strikes is not the look we're looking for. That ain't it. So I think that's kind of where he needs to go, because guess what? I don't think he's getting any more free passes. Not that he was. I know there was a lot of talk about him, having kind of a well-grooved path on his way into the UFC. Some of those fights may have been easier opponents, but maybe he was a little early to that UFC 300 pay-per-view card now that we see where he ends up in the grand scheme of things. But I think that he's got another really tough guy coming. I don't think they're going to hand him a cakewalk here. He's going to have some guy that has really elite striking or has really elite grappling and jiu-jitsu and submission skills, or all of the above. With knockout power. Those are the only guys left for him now that he's at that level. So he's got to go back. I think maybe pick up some coaching. I know that he's been training with high-level guys, but one of those skills needs to bump up. And for RDR, he called out Sean Strickland on the post-fight, which I loved, and I would love that fight. I think that's a awesome matchup. I think he's probably, in the storyline of the UFC, I think that RDR is probably one fight away from a guy like Sean Strickland, or maybe even a guy like Jared Cannonier. I would love that matchup, but those two guys are probably just one level above him as far as star power and promotion level. So I think you probably see him get a guy like Anthony Hernandez, who's coming off of a win, or maybe Roman Dolidze, who's coming off of a win. All of those guys, I wrote them down. Anthony Hernandez, Marvin Vettori, Roman Dolidze, Paulo Costa, and Brendan Allen. Any of those guys against RDR is a super fun fight. A couple of those guys coming off of a win, Anthony Hernandez and Dolidze. Those might be the right matchups for him. Maybe he gets one of those guys that are coming off of a loss. But any of those guys that are a step in the right direction for RDR, if you ask me. And I like his chances. The way that he looked against Bo Nickel, I really like his chances against it. So maybe that is, the next fight that he needs to get a guy like Strickland or get a guy like Cannonier, because you beat a guy like that and you can call for a title shot. You might still be a fight away, But the way that things go in that division, who knows what happens? You could very well find yourself in a title fight if you beat a guy like Cannonier right now, or you beat a guy like Sean Strickland sometime later this year. I mean, I love that division. Any of those guys can get it. Take all those names, put them in a hat, draw 2 out, and I'd watch them fight, you know? That's what's fun about the UFC. All these guys are super high level. Every single one of these guys is a tough matchup for one another. And so it's going to be super fun to see how that all shakes out. And I think it's going to still be fun to watch Bo Nickel make his rise through UFC. He'll be back. He'll be back. Bo will be back. He's going to go back to the drawing board and keep working hard. We have a lot left to see when it comes to Bo Nickel. The other thing that happened in Des Moines, Iowa, Figgy got absolutely dominated by Cory Sandhagen. And I did not see that coming. I was looking at this on paper. Figgy looked like the much older, shorter fighter that was going to have to change his game to do what he wanted to do. But I started looking at it and I'm like, man, Figgy's only got like a 2-inch, reach disadvantage on the arms. On the legs, he only had a 2-inch disadvantage. And so I was like, maybe the reach isn't all it's scratched up to be in this matchup. If Figgy could find a way to get on the inside, if they could find a way to get to the ground, man, Figgy's scrappy. Maybe he scrambles himself into something. Who knows? I was telling myself all of these lies before I went and watched this fight. But Cory Sandhagen set me straight right away. I mean, from round 1, he was controlling this thing, whether it was on the feet, whether, Figgy was trying to kind of pull guard or go to the ground with it. It didn't matter. Cory was dominating this thing from start to finish. He was never really in danger at all. And really, the beginning of the end was whenever Figgy started playing the leg lock games with Sandhagen here. Now, if you know about Cory Sandhagen, you know that he trains with Ryan Hall. If you know about Ryan Hall, you know that he is the real wizard whenever it comes to this 50-50 position, what you see happening in a lot of no-gi jiu-jitsu, really jiu-jitsu in general, but especially no-gi jiu-jitsu and in MMA to a significant extent, a lot more than you ever would have in the last few years. It's definitely an emerging technique, and the guys that are at the very tip of the spear when it comes to knowing that technique, training that technique, and implementing that technique successfully, it's guys like Ryan Hall and it's guys like Cory Sandhagen, and he showed that off again in the second round against Figgy, because they end up in this 50-50 position, and the whole time the commentary's accurately calling this thing, saying, he's safe here, he's clearing the knee line. There were a couple of moments where you could say that Sandhagen might have been in danger, but for the most part, he wasn't sweating it at all. He looked calm, he stayed out of danger, and then when the moment was right, he put Figgy in a very dangerous position and sat up and popped the knee and almost immediately got the tap. It was a kind of a strange one. They end up calling this victory a TKO due to injury. Now it's a TKO, but Figgy tapped. They're in the middle of a leg entanglement. Sounds a lot like a submission to me. I saw some guys that were upset about the betting line on this one because the line was pretty heavy on this Cory Sandhagen by submission. And then he gets what looks a lot like a submission, but they call it a TKO, which is, anyways, I didn't have any money on the fight, so I don't have a dog in that fight, but I won't argue one way or the other there. But I could see why you could be upset because I immediately called it sub whenever it happened. I was like, oh man, he subbed him. I can't believe he tapped him. He got him to tap. You couldn't really tell that the knee popped. It looked like maybe he was just in some pain. He had him in a pretty awkward position there. You'd have to have a lot of flexibility. Obviously, he didn't have enough of it, and he injures him so much so that Figgy couldn't even stick around for the announcement. He was already limping to the back. He'll probably need surgery. In the post-fight, if you listen to Sandhagen, he already started talking about how the fact that, look, I know this position. There's no way you're ever going to beat me in this position. As a matter of fact, I did the same thing to TJ Dillashaw not too long ago. Do not mess with me in leg locks. I will find the 50-50 position, and then I'm going to find a way to win it from there. So for all you guys that may be facing him in the future, heads up, don't play leg games with a guy like Cory Sandhagen. But who could it be that's facing Cory Sandhagen next? The MMA math in this division is so fun to play with and so fun to look at. The guys in this division, it's another situation where I could throw all those names in a hat, pull any two names out, and I would be super excited to watch them main event, main card, pay-per-view. All of these guys are superstars and are super exciting to watch, and all of them are difficult opponents for one another. But let's break it down a little bit and try to make some sense out of this. So in my opinion, this problem, if you want to call it that, of MMA math has a couple of variables, 5 as a matter of fact. It has Merab, Sean, Umar, Cory, and Peter. Okay, all those 5 guys, the 5 disciples there, are super talented, and they're all kind of have mixed it up. They fought each other a couple times. Out of those 5 guys, Merab is 3-0. He's beat everybody in that division except for Sandhagen. So Sean is 1-1. Umar is also 1-1. He picked up a win over Sandhagen. Sandhagen hasn't beaten anybody in that group. And then Jan has beaten Sandhagen, but nobody else. He lost 2 times also. So to me, we're going to have to wait and see what happens at UFC 316 to determine who should get that title shot. Because if Merab wins, out of those 5 guys, the only guy that hasn't beaten Merab is Cory Sandhagen. So in my opinion, the UFC should give that shot to Cory Sandhagen. Now, I don't know how they make those decisions, but if you ask me, that's who I would want to see fight next, because Merab's already beat everybody else. Now, if Sean O'Malley wins against Merab, he's the champion. I would say then you give the title shot to Umar, because Umar is probably the more deserving contender, but he's already lost to Merab. And so there's no reason to run that one back right now. I think that you've got another contender that you should run first if Merab has the title. But if Sean has the belt, then I think you slide Umar in there and you get that fight. Either way, I would like to see Sandhagen fight Merab, if he loses. And if, for whatever reason, if Merab wins and they don't set up Cory versus Merab, I would love to see Cory versus Sean. Like I said, any of these 2 guys, and I'm watching that fight, I'm buying the pay-per-view. I love this division, and I love how all of these guys match up against each other. Who knows where it goes? That's how I would do it if they let me pick the fights, but they don't let me pick the fights. We're going to have to wait and see what the UFC thinks about it. Wait for a big announcement. As soon as we get one, we'll come right back here to the Sporty Show and give you all of the breakdowns. Thanks for tuning in. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Like, comment, share, all those things. Follow us on TikTok at .sporty.media. It's right there scrolling along the bottom of the page. If you want to go check out our blog, sportymedia.blog, I'll write some full-length stuff there for you. You'll find my YouTube and all of my links to all of my other social media there as well. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next one.